Good afternoon. Now we will continue with the introduction, and there are two parts in this. First, an inspiration, the person that has been very important in my development, primarily as a teacher and also as a speech-language pathologist. And also the aim of his work, that is a continuum with Korthagen, and Korthagen, who put the perspectives of phronesis, that was a point for Freinet, and make it more as an involvement with phronesis and episteme, that is the practice and the theory in one concept for higher education. To you, Célestin Freinet, and he lived in Provence, and he experienced his first times in the schools in Provence in the early 1920s. He stands for the pedagogy of working experience, very much the phronesis part, and he saw the school as a part of our society. Before becoming a speech-language pathologist, I was working as a very young student as a teacher in Swedish for immigrants, and that was adults that came from all parts of the world with very much different perspectives of life, different experiences, and came from very different ambience. So it was people that were refugees, that came from very poor situations, came from warfare, and also professors, highly educated people. And at that time I was about 20 years old, so they had so much life experience, and at that time we had Swedish, we'd have our Swedish books that was describing the Swedish society and the average Swedish family that had Christmas time, that went out skiing in the north of Sweden and lived in an apartment with 3 rooms, etc. And many of those students, they couldn't imagine those things, because they came from very different situations and very different way of housing and so on, and way of life in general. So we had to drop the books, and we were working and we were creating our new own material, and we were working in the spirit of Célestin Freinet. So we made all the books, we made all the papers, we went out shopping with our students, and we were cooking, and we had very much fun. And they went very much enthusiastic about learning the Swedish language and be a part of our society. So that's why I'm the Célestin Freinet. The aim of his has been following me not only as a teacher, but also as a speech-language pathologist. And as you will see, Célestin Freinet probably has inspired Korthagen a great deal. But we will go to Korthagen later on, because he's working in the area of higher education, or education of coming professionals, teachers, and that's the difference. Okay, now let's get started with Freinet. Okay, wait a minute. Here we are. Freinet, he started a movement, the Freinet movement, and it's named after the teacher Célestin Freinet. He lived between 1896 and 1966. In the early 1920s, he came to the small town of Bar-sur-Loup in Provence in France for his first employment as a young teacher. He reflected a lot over how to make the teaching more meaningful. The 1920s was a period when many school experiments took place. Most of them were made in exclusive private schools, where the children came from homes with obvious academic tradition and plenty of money. Freinet wanted to change the school at Bar-sur-Loup, where the children came from poor farmers' homes with very different experiences and different approach to studies and schoolwork. He took with him the children on long excursions in the fields and villages around the small town. They visited artisans and farmers. When the children came back to school again, they had lots of experience to talk about. They told what they had experienced in text and drawings. Freinet came by chance over a small print shop, and the children began to set and press their stories and put them together into simple booklets or class newspapers that they sold and received money to purchase more paper and more color. The actual work with the printer became a learning situation. The children began to cooperate in the setting and printing. They were practicing to count and write. The school work felt meaningful. The knowledge that they developed here became a part of their lives and prepared them to understand the society and the working life and creating small business or enterprising. Freinet had contacts with other teachers who wanted to take part of his way of working. The children in his school exchanged letters and school papers with other children from other schools. Some of the teachers formed a cooperative where they discussed, or a cooperation where they discussed and socialized with each other. Several teachers were added. Soon they began to produce their own learning material because they had discovered that the usual textbooks were not sufficient enough, as they gave no living knowledge. This way of working in school was at the time regarded as provocative for those who had the political responsibility. Opposition grew into an incitement campaign led by the high society in the small town, supported by the police and the military. But the parents supported Célestin Freinet and his school. During the most hectic period, the parents acted as bodyguards who followed the teacher and the children to and from school. The parents in the small village were mostly poor rural workers and small farmers. These circumstances led to the superstition of the Freinet pedagogy as being a left-wing or communism supportive, but merely it was a liberal way to improve teaching. In the end, Freinet was forced to leave the village school and to open a private school, which was contrary to his principles. He wanted to continue to work within the normal school framework. He still had his parents' support, and at the end the private school of Freinet became accepted by the state as an interesting form of pedagogy. One of the fundamental principles of Freinet's thinking is that the school is indeed a part of society. in the same way as working places, homes and public institutions. This could also be reflected in the teaching of the children in school. Freinet participated in the organization of the French farm workers, which took place at this time in the mid-1920s. He built up the agricultural corporations that made it possible to get better prices on goods. Well, in politics he was a socialist and an anti-fascist, but who weren't at the beginning of the dark history with the threats from an almighty Hitler. Freinet participated later in the French resistance movement against Hitler Germany. He had contacts with the young radicals such as Henri Barbusse, Romain Rolland. Freinet regarded his role as a teacher as an equal and fellow worker. It was natural for children to call the teacher for you. This was also something new and revolutionary about it. The children saw the school as their own. The classroom changed. The desk of the teacher became unnecessary and was transformed to a bookcase. In different corners of the classroom and in the corridor outside, there was various workshops for printing, painting and carpentry. The school became a place of work. Each morning the teacher and the children came together to jointly decide on today's work. Criticism was given and received. In the classroom, the central part, except for the bookcase, were the wallpapers where the children wrote under headings such as "I praise," "I am," or "I propose." It was quite loud in the classroom, but all this cooperative work with enthusiastic children brought a different and a better discipline. The children learned lots of things. Work plans for each week and every day were adapted. There were no longer differences between school and life outside. The movement grew rapidly. Today around 20,000 French teachers are connected. Across Europe, also in Sweden, there are Freinet associations and groups that are organized both nationally and internationally. Reading the paper by Korthagen, you can see his influences from Freinet, where the phronesis, or the experiences, the empiry, always comes first, building the episteme, the theories with a big T. So you go from the small theories to the big theories. So now I just want to end this part with my previous experiences as a teacher, as a young teacher, and that Freinet for me is the practical way of learning and working. And it's very useful when you're working with your clients as a speech-language pathologist. But if you think of the higher education demands, we will continue with Korthagen. Okay.